Let's see if we can do this. Hi. It's good to be back. Good morning. Stormy Daniels was back on the stand Thursday testifying in that Manhattan criminal trial where Donald Trump is accused of violating campaign finance law by falsifying records to hide hush money payments made to the porn star in the lead up to the 2016 presidential election. I'll have much more on the testimony later on in the show, but the testimony is graphic, so I'll talk about it at the end of this episode. We go into some details. Indiana's primary on Tuesday served up more bad news for Donald Trump. A closer look at the results now suggesting a large swath of Republicans in reliably red states will not be voting for Donald Trump come November. Who can they turn to if they don't like Trump and they don't like Biden? Will it be Bobby Kennedy Jr.? There's now a growing belief that Robert Kennedy Jr. may actually put Texas in play for Democrats. I'll have more on that and the parasite in his brain. Plus, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem's book tour is officially canceled as The Hunter now becomes The Hunted. And it turns out, I hate to say it, I was absolutely right about Speaker Mike Johnson. He's going to survive Marjorie Taylor Greene. I just wish the same could be said for the rest of us. This is the Mop-Up for May 9th, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. It's good to be back. I came down with a cold, if you remember, late last month. I thought I got better, but it spread to my chest, and I had to take more time off thanks to antibiotics. I'm feeling a little better. I don't like to take antibiotics. It's the first time I've taken them in several years, but this time I needed the antibiotics. Thank you for your kind wishes, everybody. Well, here in New York City, the richest 1% confronted climate change, homelessness, and income inequality by ignoring all of it and showing up for the Met Gala, where each year the world's most famous walk the carpet, making their own individual fashion statement. And that statement is, hey, look at me. This is Usher. This is Usher wearing out his welcome. Or maybe it's Alexander McQueen. You know, I understand the kink of wanting to dress this way, Usher, but not in public. This ensemble you've got going here is precisely why locks on doors were invented. Underneath all that, Usher was wearing a $5 million watch. You would think for $5 million that watch would be able to tell Usher his 15 minutes are up. New York Judge Arthur Engoron, who presided over Donald Trump's civil fraud trial, is seen here at the Met Gala, sporting a nifty number from Chanel because he has the legs. And there's James Corden chatting it up with Trump's immigration czar, Stephen Miller, who's rocking it in a vintage Calvin Klein. I found this over Jamie Dupree's Substack. Jamie does a great job covering the Capitol in Washington, D.C. A 70-year, this is from Jamie Dupree. You should subscribe to him over at Substack. This is a 70-year-old Boston gynecologist was arrested for her role on January 6th. She has pleaded guilty to punching a female police officer in the rotunda. The rotunda, I'm certain that's not a part of the female anatomy. I'm pretty certain there's no area on a woman's lady parts that's named the rotunda. Pretty sure that's the Capitol rotunda. A 70-year-old gynecologist stormed the Capitol on January 6th, and she punched a female cop. and you thought her speculum was cold. Lawyers for the 70-year-old female gynecologist from Boston said there were extenuating circumstances, and those extenuating circumstances are she's a 70-year-old gynecologist from Boston who went to the Capitol on January 6th. It's not funny. It didn't make any sense to me until I saw Boston. I went, yeah, okay. A 70-year-old female gynecologist would, Boston? Okay. Louisiana will continue to have one of America's strictest abortion bans after the Republican-controlled state legislature refused to make exceptions in the case of rape or incest. The law does, however, make exceptions in the case of rich, white, and politically connected. 14 states now ban abortion at all stages of pregnancy. The Guardian put together an interactive map. The states, you see here, the ones marked dark red are where you can't get an abortion. And what do these 14 states all have in common? I mean, other than leading our nation in infant mortality rates? Well, this is the electoral map from 2020. Let me go big here. This is the electoral map. You need to get to 270. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by a landslide, right? 81 million votes to his 74 million, 306 electoral votes, 232 for Donald Trump. You need 270. You know, in this day and age, that's a landslide. And Joe Biden, if you go back and look at the 14 states that have pretty much outlawed abortion, Joe Biden only carried one of those 14 states, Georgia. And to get to 270, he didn't need Georgia. All he needs is, look at that, you just need the blue wall of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. He didn't need Georgia, and he didn't need Arizona, okay? All he needed was Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Well, let's talk about abortion. Let's talk about Arizona and Wisconsin. He can lose Wisconsin, but if he loses Wisconsin, then he has to win Arizona or Georgia. He's more likely going to win Arizona than he will Georgia. So let's look at Arizona and Wisconsin. This is really fascinating, and it's going to make you happy. According to the interactive map from The Guardian, 1.6 million women in Arizona are in the age range where they can get pregnant. As you know, Arizona had an 1864 abortion law that just got repealed, barely. Now, Arizona has banned abortion after 15 weeks, okay? So abortion's on the ballot in Arizona. In Wisconsin, and I'm going to talk about Wisconsin now. Wisconsin is really important. I've always said of the three in the blue wall of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, Wisconsin was the iffiest. I'm going to talk about Wisconsin for a little while. I've got some good news, and it's kind of fascinating. In Wisconsin, 1.3 million women fall into the reproductive age range. Wisconsin has a law dating back to 1849 that's still on the books, banning abortion. It's as bad as the one that they just repealed in Arizona. A judge in Wisconsin has temporarily overturned the 1849 law, and right now, abortions in Wisconsin are allowed up to 22 weeks. They resumed in September of last year. So abortion is on the ballot in Wisconsin, and that might explain why a new Quinnipiac poll shows Joe Biden beating Trump in Wisconsin. When Bobby Kennedy is factored in, the race narrows. Now, we're not sure Bobby Kennedy will be on the ballot in Wisconsin, and nobody knows anything about Bobby Kennedy yet, including Bobby Kennedy. He's all over the map. For example, he's not strong on reproductive rights. At best, he's wishy-washy, and at worst, he may be pro-life for all we know. Has said some things that suggest he may be pro-life. So here's where it really gets interesting. It's good news for Joe Biden. Talking Wisconsin, okay? Forget Michigan and Pennsylvania. He's going to win Michigan and Pennsylvania. He needs to win Wisconsin, Joe Biden does. A new CBS poll of likely Wisconsin voters, it's about a week old, 2 weeks old. It shows Trump leading Biden by only 1 percentage point. That's within the margin of error. They're tied, okay? But this is deceptive. This is deceptive. And I'm going to show you why you should be very hopeful about November. First off, there's an important Senate race to keep an eye on in Wisconsin. Democrat Tammy Baldwin is running for re-election. The primary isn't until August, but the leading Republican candidate is going to be most likely venture capitalist Eric Hovde, who recently had a walk back comments where he said old people in nursing homes shouldn't be allowed to vote. Remember, I played that for you last month? Okay, in that matchup, according to the latest CBS polling, Tammy Baldwin, Democrat, senator, incumbent, beats Hovde by 7 points. This is really important because Joe Biden leads from behind, and he's going to benefit from the updraft from down ticket candidates. There will be no ticket splitting with Tammy Baldwin. She's leading Eric Hovde by 7 points. Nobody's going in to the voting booth in Wisconsin voting for Tammy Baldwin and then saying, and I'm also going to vote for Donald Trump. If you're voting for Baldwin, you're going to vote for Joe Biden. That's the updraft that Joe Biden benefits from the down ballot candidates. And it's abortion, 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 abortion. Remember, 1.3 million Wisconsin women are of childbearing age, which means most, practically all of them, vote. So, how important is abortion? Not just to the women in Wisconsin, but to Wisconsin voters in general. CBS asked registered voters, how do you feel about Roe getting overturned? This is incredible. I mean, this is amazing. 13% of all registered Wisconsin voters said they are enthusiastic. That means they're pro-life, right? 24% said they were satisfied. So add that up and you get, 37% of registered voters in Wisconsin, they're either happy or okay with Roe getting overturned. Now, remember, for Wisconsin, abortion is in flux. Nobody knows. You could only, back in, September, you could still get an abortion. They allowed abortions again. So abortion is on the ballot here. And voters in Wisconsin have no idea how the court or the state legislature is going to rule on a woman's right to choose. And here you've got 37% of all registered Wisconsin voters telling CBS News that they're basically pro-life. 37%. Now, 23% of registered voters in Wisconsin say they're dissatisfied with Roe getting overturned. And this is so important. Anger. Angry. How many voters are angry about Roe getting overturned? Anger. Anger is what gets people off the couch and to the polls. You win elections either on fear or anger. Trump is trying to win on fear of migrants. And the anger is, well, let's be angry at the elite liberals who force their pronouns down our throats. But Republicans, their anger, you need anger. It's the great motivator, but it's not as powerful as the anger that Democrats are feeling over Roe being overturned. Look at this. 40% of all registered voters in Wisconsin, 40% are angry about Roe getting overturned. Okay? Look at the difference here. 37% of registered voters are either happy or okay with Roe getting overturned. Okay? 37% are pro-life. 40% of Wisconsin voters are angry. That's a 3% lead for the Democrats. And then you tack on top of that the 23% who are dissatisfied about Roe being overturned. That gives you 63% of Wisconsin voters either angry or dissatisfied about Roe getting overturned. This is where the 2020 election is going to be won. Right here in Wisconsin, and it's over abortion. We know that this election will be decided by suburban women in swing states. What do registered voters, men and women, feel passionate about? In Wisconsin, abortion. They are angry more so than any other issue, more than inflation, crime, or the migrants, whatever issue the Republicans and Donald Trump try to gin up to get voters angry or fearful about. None of that competes with the rage, especially in Wisconsin, that men and women from both parties feel about Roe being overturned. Abortion getting overturned is real. Inflation, crime, the migrants, those are abstractions. Abortion is where the rubber meets the road. Well, there was probably no rubber involved. That's why there's an abortion. But abortion is bigger than just abortion. And this is why men are angry about Roe being overturned. This is why fathers are angry about Roe being overturned. This is why grandmothers, women who are no longer childbearing age, are angry about Roe being overturned, because abortion is more than just about abortion. It's about love, it's about sex, and it's about freedom. It's about reproductive freedom. You know, the Republicans love talking about freedom. Abortion, in the end, is about reproductive freedom, freedom for women to decide when and if they're going to raise a family. More importantly, when and if they're going to make love, to enjoy somebody. This is bigger than just the procedure of an abortion. It gets even better for Biden. This is where the election will be won. In Wisconsin, over abortion. Look at this. Registered Wisconsin voters were asked, how closely are you following the news stories about abortion in Florida and Arizona, which up until last week had two of the most draconian anti-abortion laws. Arizona just overturned that Civil War era ban. But when this poll was taken, people were talking about Arizona. Okay, So the question of all registered voters in Wisconsin, how closely are you following news about abortion laws in other states like Arizona and Florida? Remember, I just said 63% of Wisconsin voters are either angry or dissatisfied about Roe getting overturned. Well, 60% of registered voters in Wisconsin told CBS News they are following Florida and Arizona's abortion laws closely. 40% said not closely, which falls in line with the 37% of registered Wisconsin voters who we can call pro-life. You won't find any other issue in Wisconsin where you rack up numbers over 50% like this. There is a 20% differential here on abortion. This is the issue that galvanizes Democratic voters, voters who might be lukewarm about Joe Biden. I don't know why, but they are. And he's going to get the updraft from abortion being on the ballot. He's going to get the updraft from Senator Tammy Baldwin supporters who have learned their lesson, and they know that Donald Trump cannot pick any more Supreme Court justices. Okay, this is incredible. This is talking about galvanizing the Democratic base. This is just take another look at the 2020 election returns here, okay? And what gets people to vote? What got people to vote in 2020? It was hatred for Donald Trump, 4 years of Donald Trump. You're looking at the 2020 electoral map. In the past, I cannot stress this enough, the blue wall since 2020 has been Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Those are the three states that Hillary shouldn't have lost in 2016, but she did. And this map is set. It is set, except for Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Georgia, and Arizona. The rest, not what did I say? Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, Arizona and Georgia, maybe Nevada, are the only states that are not set. The rest are done. These swing states, and it's Wisconsin. Excuse me. So, I've always said of the three in the blue wall, Wisconsin would be the iffiest. I don't see how Biden loses Wisconsin. Take a look at this. CBS asked likely voters in Wisconsin if they're dissatisfied or angry about Roe getting overturned. Okay, you saw the question about anger of all registered voters. Now it's parsed between Biden supporters and Trump supporters. This is effing incredible. This is absolutely incredible. CBS asked likely voters in Wisconsin if they're dissatisfied or angry about Roe getting overturned. Half of Trump voters were dissatisfied with the overturn of Roe. I'm sorry, 49% of Trump supporters say they are dissatisfied. Let that sink in for a second. 49% of Wisconsin voters for Trump are upset that Roe has been overturned. And this is why Donald Trump doesn't want this election to be about abortion. He reads these polls closer than anybody. 49% of his own supporters in Wisconsin are upset that he appointed the three judges who overturned Roe. 49% of Trump voters in Wisconsin are essentially pro-choice. Only 13% of Trump voters in Wisconsin said they were angry about it being overturned. Okay. Now, look at this. Biden voters. You don't see numbers like this on issue polls. They don't exist. Biden voters, 50% said they were dissatisfied with Roe being overturned, but 86% also checked the box that says they're angry. So 86% of all Biden voters in Wisconsin are angry about Roe. There is no other issue that will get voters who support Trump or Biden that will get a number like 86%. You're not going to find that in any state on any issue other than 86% of Biden supporters are angry about Roe. And again, you get people to the polls either out of fear or anger. And I happen to think anger is way more powerful than fear. I know, love, right? You're Bill Clinton, you vote your hopes, not your fears. Anger. Anger. I've been saying this for years. Anger. So that's all you need to know. This election is going to be about abortion in Wisconsin. And the real trouble that Donald Trump finds himself in is he's trying to be a moderate when it comes to abortion. But, you can't be half pregnant. And with the pro-life movement, you can't be half pro-life. They're never happy. You're not going to win over, or Trump is not going to win over any of the pro-choice voters by being reasonable. All it does is alienate the pro-life voters who got Trump elected, who now feel abandoned by him because he came out against a national abortion ban. And then, even worse, he succeeded in lobbying Arizona lawmakers into overturning that, 1864? That abortion law it was 1864. He got them to overturn it. So what do if you're Donald Trump? Well, you try to change the subject. He cannot allow this election to be about abortion. Well, okay, so what do you talk about? Crime, inflation, the migrants. He has to lie about crime. Crime is down. Inflation is coming down. The migrants is an imaginary crisis. Well, this election, especially in Wisconsin, is about abortion, also about the economy, especially in Wisconsin. This is why Joe Biden was at Gateway Technical College yesterday, boasting about Microsoft spending $3.3 billion on an AI data center that's being built in Wisconsin. It's going to create more than 2,000 union construction jobs. Microsoft is spending that money, not the United States government. Why is Microsoft spending this money? Because Joe Biden, through the CHIPS Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, is using American tax dollars to finance high-tech jobs, good-paying high-tech jobs that stay here in America. Politico is reporting this morning that their new poll, they take polls with Morning Consult, and they have a new poll showing that Biden leads Trump by 3 points when voters are asked who has done more for America when it comes to infrastructure. Trump never passed a single infrastructure bill. Remember, every week was infrastructure week and it never materialized because the 4 years of Trump were just pure chaos. That new Microsoft data center in Wisconsin will be built on the very same spot that then President Donald Trump showed up to back in 2018, along with the head of Foxconn, not an American company. They're out of Taiwan, and their manufacturing plants are usually in China, but they're all over the world. He showed up with the head of one of the most evil companies on the planet, Foxconn, and they promised the people of Wisconsin a brand new $10 billion manufacturing site. If you're a longtime listener to this show, you'll remember that back then in 2018, I told you that Foxconn is notorious for staging these groundbreaking ceremonies with the golden shovels. They do it all around the world at construction sites that never get built. And this was no exception. Homes were raised in Wisconsin. American tax dollars were spent to build this fictitious manufacturing plant. And Foxconn, this is the same company that has to provide suicide nets to catch their workers when they jump from their buildings. They bailed on the project. It never materialized. Here is Joe Biden going after Trump in Wisconsin yesterday.
He and the administration promised a $10 billion investment by Foxconn to build a new manufacturing complex, create 13,000 new jobs. In fact, he came here with your Senator, Ron Johnson, literally holding a golden shovel, promising to build the 8th wonder of the world. Are you kidding me? Look what happened. They dug a hole with those golden shovels, and then they fell into it. Look, they didn't shovel other dirt. They did shovel some dirt. 100 homes were bulldozed. They wasted hundreds of millions of dollars, your state and local tax dollars, to promise a project that never happened. Foxconn turned out to be just that, a con. Go figure.
So, he's not young. It's hard to hear him. He doesn't enunciate properly. I don't care. Look at his effing record. Look at what he's delivered to the American people. I don't care about the cosmetics. I wish you could hear him speak, but it's not what you say, it's what you do, okay? And, he gets some things wrong. He said it was Senator Ron Johnson who showed up at the groundbreaking. It wasn't. It wasn't a lie. He forgot. It was Ron Johnson wasn't there. It was Speaker Paul Ryan, who I'll be talking about in a second, and then Governor, the union-busting Koch brothers tool, the odious Republican governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker. He's no longer governor. They have a Democrat now. You might remember in 2012, Scott Walker became the first American governor to survive a recall election that was called after Walker alienated half the state by limiting the right of state workers to engage in collective bargaining. He survived that recall effort. Anyway, bad guy. Well, the state legislature of New Hampshire got some more good news. Finally outlawed child marriages. This is a thing that Republicans are obsessed on. Older men being able to marry, I'm going to say 16-year-old girls and not go any lower because it sours my stomach, but younger than 16. This is something a lot of Republicans believe in. Total control of women. How do you get that? Child brides. They want it to be legal. So the state legislature of New Hampshire finally outlawed child marriages. 6 years ago, Democrats succeeded in raising the age of marriage to 16 over objections from Republican lawmakers. Okay? So 6 years ago, this is really creepy. But these are Republicans. They're really creepy. New Hampshire, the Democrats had a fight to lift the marriage age to 16 because Republicans want to control women. So they got it raised to 16 6 years ago. Last week, Democrats succeeded in raising the age of marriage to 18. 174 Republicans voted against the measure, including Republican State Representative Jess Edwards, who expressed this concern.
Do you agree with the point of view that if we continually restrict the freedom of marriage as a legitimate social option, when we do this to people who are of ripe fertile age and may have a pregnancy and a baby involved, are we not in fact making abortion a much more desirable alternative when marriage might be the right solution for some freedom-loving couple?
A freedom-loving couple. Remember I said earlier that abortion is all about freedom? And he's saying a freedom-loving couple that wants to get married, because nothing screams freedom more than a teenage girl forced to marry her older cousin who just impregnated her. These people are demented. Not only, they're dangerous. These are Republicans. Not all, but too many of them. Anyway, in Ohio, which Sherrod Brown notwithstanding, Ohio has become a solid red state. Unfortunately, we've talked about Sherrod Brown and we'll be following his reelection. But for the most part, Ohio has fallen into the red abyss. And the state legislature of Ohio finally got around to admitting there's such a thing as marital rape. And they finally passed HB 161, which makes it illegal for a husband to commit an act of sexual violence against his wife and permits a wife to testify against her husband now after she's accused him of rape. There is nothing funny about rape, but stupid people are funny. I mean, the results of this are horrific, but I read this and what planet am I living on? What century is this? The bill outlawing marital rape it passed in the Senate, in the Ohio Senate, and it passed in the Ohio House almost unanimously, except for one lone Republican who opposed it. That would be former plumber, State Representative Bill Dean, who represents the horrible people of Xenia, Ohio. And he told the Columbus Dispatch why he voted why he was the only member of the State House to vote against a bill that outlaws marital rape. He said, quote, "I personally don't believe that a man, if he's married and has physical relations with his wife, well, I just don't believe that can be considered rape." No, physical relations with your wife isn't rape. Nobody's saying that's rape. Rape is rape. Someone should perform a welfare check on State Representative Bill Dean's wife. Apparently, State Representative Bill Dean, Republican from Ohio, doesn't know the difference between sex with your wife and raping your wife. Someone needs to do a welfare check and see if his wife is okay. America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, is being sued for rape by a former assistant who accused him of forcing her to satisfy him while, I'm not making this up, while he chomped down Viagra's and talked on the phone with Donald Trump. Here is the incredible part of this story. What makes this lawsuit so shocking and incredible. You ready? It's the least of Rudy's problems. For anybody else on this planet, this accusation would be a career-ending catastrophe. But for Rudy Giuliani, getting accused of forcing a woman to satisfy him while he talks on the phone with Donald Trump, for Rudy Giuliani, that's tantamount to a minor quirk in his personality. Rudy is in bankruptcy court, and in bankruptcy court, you're obligated to hand over all your financials, and you have to do it every month to show proof of what you owe, what is owed to you, and what you have or what you're trying to hide. But Rudy can't deliver his financials anymore because no accounting firm is willing to work with him since he refuses to pay them for the previous work they did for him. Rudy turns 80 this year. According to records, he owes $500 million to assorted creditors, including 2 Georgia election workers who were awarded $148 million after Rudy was found to have defamed them by spewing racist vitriol, accusing these 2 women of stuffing ballots for Joe Biden. Earlier this year, Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor, promised the bankruptcy court that he would limit his spending to just $43,000 a month until his finances could be sorted out. He owes $500 million, and he says, I can't pay the creditors. I know I owe $500 million, but I'll limit my spending to $43,000 a month. According to the New York Times, the last time Rudy was able to deliver his financials to the bankruptcy court, Rudy reported that he was spending $120,000 a month. And according to the New York Times, that report was, quote, spotty and incomplete. In other words, he was spending more than $120,000 a month. According to the New York Times, Giuliani now earns about $500,000 a year from assorted pensions, including Social Security. He also hosts a radio show and a podcast, which costs him money, he says. Rudy told the bankruptcy judge, I can't sell my $3.5 million condo in Florida because surely my creditors don't want to see me homeless. No, nobody wants to see you homeless, Rudy. We want to see you in prison. We want to see you with 3 square meals and a roommate in prison. Now, what's so funny about this, as you know, I delight in Rudy's suffering because he was a horrible mayor, a racist mayor who allowed the police in New York to take their gloves off and make it illegal for black people to leave their home with the stop and frisking. So I delight in whatever happens to him. But here's the great thing about this. Before 2020, right before Rudy began working for Donald Trump, Rudy was drinking, he had marital problems and divorces, but he was still worth $30 million. He went to work for Donald Trump to prove non-existent election fraud in November of 2020. What are we looking at? 3 years later, 3.5 years later, he goes from $30 million to being $500 million in debt. Now, I despise Rudy Giuliani. So when you think about it, Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, bankrupt. I despise this guy. John Eastman, the attorney who came up with the false elector scheme, he's big shot at the evil Claremont Institute in California. Well, he just got his law license suspended. And last week he petitioned the court to have his law license reinstated so he could find work to pay his legal bills. But that motion was rejected. His law license suspended. Looks like it's going to be permanent. Can't make a living. Eastman is tapping into his wife's pension to pay his legal fees. Peter Navarro is wasting away in jail, broken. So in many ways, Donald Trump has performed a public service. At least for me, the people I despise to the core of my very being have been ruined simply by getting touched by Donald Trump. I don't think we can overstate the contribution Donald Trump has made to society in this respect. The horrible people whose lives he's ruined, in many ways, I don't know. Jeff Duncan played professional baseball, which means when he decided to run for political office, he had to do so as a Republican. That's the law. If you're a washed-up actor or a washed-up baseball player, you go into politics as a Republican. Steve Garvey, for example, is running for Senate in California as a Republican. That's what washed-up athletes and actors do. They find a home in the Republican Party. Anyway, Duncan served as lieutenant governor of Georgia from 2019 to 2023, and he's just written an opinion piece for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution where he endorses Joe Biden for president, even though Jeff Duncan is a Republican. Duncan writes, quote, "Unlike Donald Trump, I've belonged to the GOP my entire life. So this November, I am voting for a decent person I disagree with on policy over a criminal defendant without a moral compass." Right? What is the most important issue on the ballot come November? Abortion? Democracy? Jeff Duncan thinks democracy is on the ballot, so he's voting for Joe Biden. Paul Ryan served as Speaker of the House during the first 2 years of the Trump presidency. Mitt Romney picked Ryan as his running mate back in 2012 because Paul Ryan branded himself a fiscal hawk, preaching the virtues of budgetary discipline. Yeah, that's why, as Speaker, he helped Trump pass a tax cut for the richest 1% that added $8 trillion to our national debt. Well, now that he's no longer Speaker, now that Paul Ryan is no longer relevant, Paul Ryan announced he will not be voting for Donald Trump in November. He will instead write in someone else's name because he said character counts. Character counts, yes. Character is important, but not so important that Ryan can bring himself to endorse Joe Biden, because that would take more character than is necessary on his part. Couldn't make the tough decision. You know, a great woman, Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, she's written an interesting book, and she talks about killing her dog, her family dog, a puppy, and the family goat. And she writes about it because it's like Winston Churchill. It's important for voters to understand that leadership, governing, is about making the tough decisions. You should read Kristi Noem's book. And she says, like Winston Churchill, she was able to make tough decisions where there's no easy answer. Now, Paul Ryan, he knows that Donald Trump is a mortal threat to our democracy. Yet he can't make the tough decision to endorse Joe Biden, who he disagrees with on spending. Well, you got to read that Kristi Noem book, because leadership, Paul, is about making the tough decisions where you say, okay, it's not a perfect world. I don't like Joe Biden. I don't like his stance on fiscal policy. But for the sake of our country, I have to endorse him. You see, Paul Ryan, because he hasn't read Kristi Noem's book, he can't make the tough decisions that haunt you at night. Because unlike South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, he never had to sit the family down and explain why mommy snapped and killed the family dog and the family goat. He's never made the tough decision of snapping and going on a killing spree the way South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem did. Indiana's primary was Tuesday. We're just beginning to absorb the data, and a disturbing trend for Donald Trump continues to emerge, where roughly 1 out of 5 Republican voters are showing up to the polls, but not for him, even though nobody's running against Donald Trump. They're actually showing up not to vote for him. That's what gets them to the polls. 1 out of 5 Republican voters are energized by the thought of going to the polls not to vote for Donald Trump. Nikki Haley dropped out of the race back in March, and yet Republicans continue to vote for her. This is a very clear message from within the Republican Party that something ain't right. Haley, by the way, has yet to endorse Donald Trump. It's too late for her to make a third-party run. So, we're not going to see Nikki Haley doing the honorable. There's nothing honorable about this opportunistic hack. She's going to back Trump. She's just, holding out. And she's going to speak at the convention and deliver a full-throated endorsement of Trump the same way Sununu, her big backer in New Hampshire, has done. She's quiet right now. Her name, you'll notice, has not been bandied about as a possible running mate for Trump. To me, that suggests that she might be at the top of his list. He likes drama and surprise. The fact that she's not being mentioned, I suspect he's considering her. There's also talk that he may pick Florida Congressman Byron Donald or Florida Senator Marco Rubio. So I want to clear something up. Despite what many of us have been led to believe, there are no constitutional issues preventing a president and his running mate being from the same state. This, some of you are old enough to remember when Bush picked Dick Cheney, there was a problem because Cheney was living in Texas and Bush was living in Texas, so Cheney had to pretend he lives. Is it Wyoming? Is it Idaho or Wyoming? It's Wyoming, right? They get 2 senators in Wyoming. I got more people living in my apartment, and they have 2 senators. So it's only an issue. Cheney could have stayed in Texas, by the way. There's nothing in the Constitution preventing a president and a vice president from being from the same state. It's only an issue if the race for president gets thrown into the House of Representatives. Almost happened in 2020. And even if it does get thrown into the House of Representatives, there are ways around it. Okay, I digress. Back to Nikki Haley. Take a look at Tuesday's Indiana. What am I doing here? There we go. Let me go full screen here. Take a look at Indiana's results. Okay? What did she do? She dropped out in March. Okay? She got almost 22% of the vote in the deep red state of Indiana. Okay? Indiana is, you got some hardcore Republicans in Indiana. She got 21.7, 22% of the vote. 22% of Republicans voted for Nikki Haley in Indiana on Tuesday. The Hill reports much of her strength Tuesday was in the suburbs. And that's where this election is going to be won, in the suburbs. Women in the suburbs. In Arizona, a few months back, she got 17% of the vote, even though she was no longer on the ballot. They're calling these zombie votes. She's a zombie candidate. Listen, she was a zombie candidate before she dropped out. Look at this. Pennsylvania last month, a key swing state, almost 17%, 16.6% of Republicans got off their couch and went to vote for somebody other than Donald Trump. This is a number in the lead up to the convention that you have to watch. 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5 Republicans actively not voting for Donald Trump. What does that mean? What does that mean? 1/5 of Republicans are showing up to vote for someone other than Trump. Leave a comment. Maybe I'm wrong. I've never seen anything like this in modern American politics. I know Biden has got the uncommitted voters who punished him in Michigan and a little in Minnesota for his commitment to Benjamin Netanyahu. but I don't think I've seen 20%. A presumptive nominee is playing out the primary calendar. He's already got the nomination sealed, and he's playing out the primary season with nearly 20% of voters from his own party going out of their way to choose someone else, even though nobody else is running. This is something to pay attention to, and it's good news for Joe Biden. On Tuesday, don't pay attention to the polls. A lot of these pollsters are Republicans who are paid to create the illusion that Trump is a lot stronger than he actually is. I'm going to talk about that in a second. I just want to go over Indiana. On Tuesday, Indiana Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. I've played clips of this nut job. She's batshit crazy. She fended off a primary challenge. Spartz, a Republican born in Ukraine, voted 3 weeks ago against funding the war against Russia. Earlier this year, she announced she was retiring, but then changed her mind, and that flip-flop turned this primary race into a tough one for her. She was outspent by Chuck Goodrich, a multimillionaire who took out a $4.5 million loan to self-finance his primary challenge to Victoria Spartz. He blanketed the airwaves, highlighting allegations that Congresswoman Victoria Spartz, besides being batshit crazy, is also an abusive boss. Apparently, she's not easy to work for. Well, he ended up with 33% of the vote. Congresswoman Spartz narrowly escaped defeat. She got 39% of the vote. A 6-point differential for an incumbent, that's tight. That's tight. Despite her being batshit crazy, no chance of the Democrats flipping that seat. She'll be flipping her lid, but there won't be. She's going to come back to Washington, representing Indiana's 5th congressional district. Now, Indiana is deep red. The 5th congressional district, even redder. She's going to beat her Democratic challenger by at least 11 points. So Indiana's Republican Senator Mike Braun was elected to the Senate in 2018. He decided to serve one term, and now he's running for governor of Indiana as Republican Governor Eric Holcomb is being term limited out. Senator Braun, Republican, easily secured the nomination on Tuesday, which means there's now a vacancy for his Senate seat. Republican Jim Banks, horrible guy. He has served 4 terms representing Indiana's 3rd congressional district. He cruised to victory Tuesday, securing the Republican nomination to fill Mike Braun's seat. There's no chance his empty congressional seat will be filled by a Democrat. Banks won his district in 2022 by at least 18 points. As for winning the Senate, he's almost impossible to beat. He served in Afghanistan, and he headed the Republican Study Committee, which you should pay attention to. That's where a lot of hard right policy emerges. He'll be challenged by Valerie McRae. She's a psychologist. She's black. She won the Democratic nomination for Senate in Indiana on Tuesday. Is she going to be able to flip Indiana red to blue? No. But I like to make predictions. So let me talk about Indiana, because Indiana is interesting and important. We may be looking, and I know the polls, which you shouldn't be paying attention to, I know the polls don't tell you this, but we may be looking at a wave election. Trump won Indiana in 2016 by 19 points. He beat Hillary by 19 points in 2016. Okay. That being said, the seat that Jim Banks is running for, Braun's seat, was previously held by a Democrat, Joe Donnelly. Donnelly lost it. Democrat lost it in 2018 to Mike Braun, who's now running for governor. Donnelly lost by a little more than 134,000 votes. So, in a wave election, 134,000 votes is pretty easy to make up. If this is going to be a wave election, I think in Indiana, you're going to see ticket splitting, where Republicans will vote for Jim Banks for Senate, and they either don't vote for Trump or anybody, and that's what happened in 2020, where that happened in Wisconsin, where, anyway, or they vote for Biden. I can imagine that the more likely scenario is Jim Banks wins big and Biden maybe wins Indiana, maybe. Obama won Indiana. Obama and Joe Biden won Indiana in 2008. So this is my prediction. I think you're more likely going to see Biden win Indiana than you will see Jim Banks lose the race for Senate. I think this is going to be a wave election. I'm going to say it's going to be, it will not be Trump winning with 19 points the way he beat Hillary. Because Indiana, yes, it's deep red, but Trump tried to hang Indiana's favorite son, Mike Pence. And Mike Pence, as you know, announced back on March 15th that he will not be endorsing Trump. He's got a brother, Greg Pence, who's an Indiana congressman, ex-Marine. He's disgusted by the Republican Party, and he's quitting Congress. This is his last year. I think there's a bad taste in some mouths, and some bad Republican mouths in Indiana. So, I don't know. I think Biden might do a lot better in Indiana. I don't know. Unless it's a wave election. Oh, you know, Obama won Indiana in 2008 because it was a wave election. So this is, and I know the polls don't say this. I think this is shaping up to be one of those elections that right up until the weekend before Election Day, it will all start caving in on Trump. This has happened before, where it looks like it's going to be tight, and then the Monday before the election, the pollster comes in and says, you're going to have to claim voter fraud, Mr. Trump, because you're losing big. That happened to Jimmy Carter in 1980 when he was running for re-election. It was he was running against Reagan. It was incredibly tight. The polls showed a tight election. And then in the final 36 hours, the floor just gave way. And I think this is how the election plays out. It's going to be neck and neck. We're going to be biting our fingernails, biting other people's fingernails until the very bitter end. And then I think Biden wins big. I think in 36 hours from Saturday till Tuesday, everything just changes. There's this massive shift. There'll be something that Trump says that will the exit polling will reveal that the thing that he said in the weekend before the election was a bridge too far. It will be the usual, it'll be something, but people will say, that's when I decided I couldn't vote for him. If Mark Burnett, who owns The Apprentice, will release the N-word tapes, that could be the October. Well, wouldn't be a surprise. We all know they exist. But so I think it's going to be neck and neck until the bitter end, and then Biden wins big, and we all look back and say, well, of course he did. How could he not have? Just remember how scared we are now, and then a year from now, we're going to be saying, of course Biden was. How could Biden not beat this homunculus? Senator Bernie Sanders waited until the last minute to make it official, but yes, he is running for re-election this November. Bernie has been serving in the Senate since 2007. Before that, he was a congressman. In 2016, he ran for the Democratic nomination, getting 43% of the popular vote. This is one of the reasons, and what, if you're going to point fingers, it's not one thing. It's not Putin. It's not Bernie bros that gave us Trump. It's not Hillary forgetting to campaign in Michigan. It's an accumulation of things. You can't blame Trump on one specific thing. But one of the things that contributed to Trump winning in 2016 is Bernie ran. He got 43% of the popular vote when he was running in the primaries, but he ended up with only 39% of the delegates at the nominating convention in Philadelphia. And that left so it was the Clinton machine Hillary still got more popular votes than Bernie. She beat Bernie in 2016, but that differential left a sour taste in the mouths of some of Bernie's supporters who bailed on Hillary in the general. Some think maybe some of them voted for Trump. I suspect most of them voted for Hillary, but some stayed home, despite Bernie's full-throated endorsement of Hillary. You can't blame Trump on one thing. Everybody is responsible for Trump. There were a few Bernie supporters who are being blamed for Trump. That's not fair. There were a handful of Bernie supporters who should have voted for Hillary. if you're voting for, anyway. New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez is up for re-election, but hasn't decided whether he's going to run. So Menendez's name will not appear on the Democratic primary ballot in June. Democratic Congressman Andy Kim is expected to win the nomination. Good guy. But Senator Menendez is leaving the door open to possibly running as an independent come November. His trial begins next week inside a federal courtroom where he is charged with parlaying his chairmanship of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee into a bribery scheme where he used his influence to perform favors in exchange for cash, gold, and a Mercedes-Benz. His seat is expected to remain blue no matter who wins in November. It's either going to be Andy Kim, who's probably going to win the Democratic nomination in June, and Menendez, if he is acquitted, his trial starts next week, and he decides to run as an independent. It's either going to be Menendez or Andy Kim. Nobody's flipping that seat red. Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas. This is very infuriating. Remember Henry Cuellar? If you listen to my show, Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas says he's still running for re-election. He should drop out right now, and Jessica Cisneros should run instead of him. He says he's still running for re-election, even though he and his wife were just indicted for accepting $600,000 in bribes from a Mexican bank and the state oil company of the Azerbaijan Republic. Cuellar, you might remember, we talked about him. Cuellar is the only self-described pro-life member of the Democratic caucus. Anti-abortion Democrat. Only one. And he gets an A rating from the National Rifle Association. If you've been listening to my podcast for a couple of years, you might remember he faced a serious primary challenge from Jessica Cisneros, who's an immigration attorney. She's no fan of the NRA, and she obviously favors a woman's right to choose. You could say she was the real pro-life candidate, not Henry Cuellar. And despite Jessica Cisneros back in 2022 clearly more representative of who the Democrats were back then and where we want the Democrats to be heading, despite Jessica Cisneros being the much better candidate, then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi endorsed Cuellar in the primaries, and he only beat Jessica Cisneros by fewer than 300 votes in a runoff election. It was a total betrayal of the pro-choice movement for the Democratic leadership to endorse Henry Cuellar over Jessica Cisneros. Was it really bad? Really bad. Let's remain in Texas as long as we're being really bad. How am I doing? I'm oh boy. Okay. I feel better, and I got some notes here. So, Texas, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the mass shooting in Uvalde, where 19 children and 2 teachers were gunned down and 17 injured after a former student opened fire with an AR-15. Hundreds of law enforcement agents waited outside the school for 1 hour and 14 minutes before they went in. Why? 2 reasons. the kids weren't rich, and the police officers were afraid of getting shot. Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez, who served in our armed forces, represents Texas's 23rd congressional district, where that mass murder took place. He represents the people of Uvalde. 1 month after the massacre, 19 children and 2 teachers killed in Uvalde, President Joe Biden signed into law the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This is another legislative achievement of Joe Biden's. It's not enough, but look at what we're dealing with. He's been calling for an assault weapons ban, the renewal of the assault weapons ban. We forget how strong Joe Biden is on gun control. He did the best he can here with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which is the most substantive gun control legislation since the assault weapons ban of 1994. Joe Biden is the most consequential president since Lyndon Johnson. And, when you rack up the legislative accomplishments, he is a lion of the Senate, Joe Biden, the same way Lyndon Johnson was a lion of the Senate and knew how to get bills passed. He's more consequential than Lyndon Johnson because he's not getting us into Vietnam. Although the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 65, you're not doing a volume business as president. I mean, Biden is doing a volume business, and LBJ did a volume business. But if he had just passed the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 65, LBJ would have been one of the most consequential presidents of all time. And then the war on poverty. But in terms of racking up numbers, and Biden, nobody's coming close to him. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, not great. Not the assault weapons ban. But among other things, it makes it harder for Americans under the age of 21 to buy a weapon. And it increased funding so states could enforce their red flag laws, keeping guns out of the hands of the mentally ill. Even though, I hate to break it to you, we've talked about this on the show, mass shooters don't fit the diagnosis of mentally ill. There's a difference between being mentally ill and snapping and shooting up a place. And linking mental illness to mass shooters is very unfair to those of us who suffer from mental illness, because most people who suffer from mental illness are not dangerous. That's for another show. Anyway, Uvalde, Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez, he represents the people of Uvalde, and even though he's a Republican, he voted for Joe Biden's bipartisan gun control legislation. How could he not? It was a month after Uvalde. How could he not vote for that? And because he voted for this weak gun control legislation, his Republican Party of Texas just this March voted to censure him. Well, it's no surprise that Congressman Tony Gonzalez, Republican, told reporters 3 weeks ago that there are a lot of scumbags in his party Some, he said, would be right at home in the KKK. You should be following Tony Gonzalez, okay? On March 5th, Texas's statewide primaries were held. Gonzalez failed to get 50% of the vote. That means he's heading into a May 28th Republican runoff against Brandon Herrera. Who is Brandon Herrera? Well, he dropped out of college to run a firearms manufacturing business. He's in the gun business, and he wants to represent the people of Uvalde. He also has a YouTube channel with 3 million subscribers where he sings the praises of his favorite guns, and he wants to represent Uvalde. Well, Congressman Tony Gonzalez got 45% of the vote. Herrera got 24%. So as we head into the May 28th runoff, Brandon Herrera is gaining steam. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, wields a lot of power in Texas, probably more than Governor Greg Abbott. Well, Lieutenant Dan Patrick finally endorsed incumbent Tony Gonzalez, even though it was Dan Patrick's Texas GOP that just censured Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez for supporting gun control. So, what was it about Herrera, the challenger, that Patrick didn't like? Why did Dan Patrick endorse incumbent Tony Gonzalez? Well, on his YouTube channel, Herrera said, quote, "Barron Trump is like 9 feet tall." And then he imitated Barron by talking in a cartoonish voice while saying, "Daddy is coming, Daddy is angry," and everybody laughed. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said, "I cannot endorse Herrera because Donald Trump's son is off limits and shall not be ridiculed." That is why Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who censured Tony Gonzalez because the congressman from Uvalde voted for gun control, he changed his tune and said he's going to support Tony Gonzalez because Herrera said that Trump's kid is 9 feet tall. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick was okay with Herrera when Herrera trivialized American veterans committing suicide at alarming rates using firearms. This is what Herrera said. Quote, "I often think of putting a gun in my mouth, so I guess you can say I'm an honorary veteran." This is a gun manufacturer making fun of the incredibly high suicide rates for American veterans. And he wants to represent the people of Uvalde. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick of Texas doesn't have a problem with that. No problem with that. But you call Trump's son, you say he's 9 feet tall. You cannot ridicule the president's son. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick of Texas had no problem when Herrera on his YouTube channel made jokes about the Holocaust, made jokes about Nazis, trivializing the Holocaust. Or no problem that Herrera once worked for the Sons of Confederate Veterans. All that was fine. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick had no problem Herrera crossed the line when he said Donald Trump's 17-year-old son was 9 feet tall. That's what makes Herrera unworthy of Texas Lieutenant Governor Republican Dan Patrick's endorsement. Texas Senator Ted Cruz is up for re-election, and if this is going to be a wave election, he's in trouble. Nobody likes Ted Cruz. Nobody. Even the people who vote for Ted Cruz don't like him. Nothing likable about Ted Cruz. He's in trouble this election cycle. He's running against Congressman Colin Allred, who is much stronger than Beto O'Rourke, who challenged Cruz back in 2018. O'Rourke was a congressman, and I know this is going to upset people. He was a fraud. He was married to a rich Republican whose father financed his political ambitions. Beto O'Rourke, he did stand up to the gun lobbyists in Texas. I more than I've ever done. So fraud might be the wrong word. Charlatan. He's a bit of a charlatan. He was a lightweight. He was inauthentic. I'm sorry. But he went up against Ted Cruz, and Beto O'Rourke got 4,045,000 votes. Ted Cruz got 4,260,000 votes. Cruz only won out of like 8,300,000 votes cast. Cruz only beat O'Rourke by 200,000 votes. Not good if you're Ted Cruz. So if this is going to be a wave election, Ted Cruz is vulnerable, especially if Bobby Kennedy Jr. and the dead worm in his brain get on the ballot in Texas. Bobby Kennedy, I didn't think was going to be playing a major role in the general election. I think Bobby Kennedy is a phenomenon for the wrong reasons. There is who Bobby Kennedy is, and then there is who low information voters think Bobby Kennedy is. Texas, so you have to ask yourself, okay, where's Bobby Kennedy going to get on the ballot? And in what states, and which states are prone to low information voters? Well, Texas has a lot of low information voters because they have low information candidates. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Greg Abbott, Ted Cruz, not so low information. He's pretty smart, detestably smart. Bobby Kennedy, according to the New York Times, is a major problem for Ted Cruz. I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold. So I'm on antibiotics, and I took a week off, and I'm getting my strength back. But I've got a tickle in my throat. I think that was Linda Lovelace's autobiography. I've got a tickle in my throat. Okay. According to the New York Times, Ted Cruz is worried about Bobby Kennedy Jr. He's worried that Bobby Kennedy, who's not running for Senate, he's worried that Bobby is going to siphon off some of Trump's votes And along with those Trump votes, he'll be taking Cruz's votes with him, even though Bobby's not running for Senate. If Ted Cruz lost to Beto O'Rourke in 2018 by 200,000 votes, Ted Cruz, who's less popular now than he was in 2018, he can't afford former Trump voters showing up for Kennedy and then forgetting to vote for Cruz. Also, Colin Allred is not Beto O'Rourke. Congressman Colin Allred is a very charismatic candidate. He's a former NFL player, and he's then became a civil rights attorney. Now, earlier I said the GOP is where washed-up athletes become politicians. So why isn't Allred a Republican? Because after he played football, he became a civil rights attorney. Okay, that's the difference. J. David Goodman, writing over at the New York Times, says that a majority of Texas voters dislike Trump, Joe Biden, and Ted Cruz. Bobby Kennedy entering the race will bring in new voters, people who've never voted before, who are not interested in the old guard. Ted Cruz is the old guard, so there's a distinct possibility they'll vote for someone new like Democrat Congressman Colin Allred. Goodman over at the Times says a new poll of Texas voters shows the people who are going to vote for Bobby Kennedy detest Ted Cruz, but they like Allred, Congressman Colin Allred. Polling consistently shows that in a two-way race between Congressman Colin Allred, Democrat, and Republican Ted Cruz, Cruz wins. But you put Kennedy on the ballot, Cruz loses to Colin Allred. It's really interesting. Bobby Kennedy is way more interesting than I thought he was going to be. We'll have a clearer picture of Kennedy's chances of making it onto the Texas ballot after next Monday when he hands in his signatures. It's really interesting. Back in March, in the Texas primary, Trump got nearly 78% of the vote. Haley got 17.5% of the vote, 2% uncommitted. That's 1 out of 5 Texas Republicans not voting for Trump. Now, Nikki Haley hadn't dropped out yet, but this is consistent. 1 out of 5. She got uncommitted 2% plus 17.5. That's 19.5. That's about 20%. 1 out of 5 Republicans in Texas did not vote for Donald Trump. Trump beat Biden in 2020 by about 6 percentage points. And we're talking about 38 electoral votes that are in play here. I don't know if you remember, but in 2020, for a while, it looked like Biden was going to win Texas. He didn't win. He lost by, about 6 percentage points. But for a while, it looked like he was going to win. Bobby Kennedy is going to be really interesting. Like I said, and this is, I think, really important to keep in mind heading into November. There is who Bobby Kennedy really is and who low information voters think he is. You got to remember, I think you got to remember, that third-party candidates are tofu. They absorb whatever flavor a low information voter wants to throw at them. whatever you want to sprinkle onto Bobby Kennedy Jr., he'll taste like. It's like tofu, because he doesn't have to win. He's not going to win. That was Trump's charm in 2016. Trump kind of won the nomination inadvertently running as a third-party candidate. Low information voters were willing to fill in many of the blanks in 2016 for Donald Trump. They were willing to see things that weren't there, but they wanted to believe were there. I cannot tell you the number of people in 2016 who insisted that Trump was pro-choice. And when you talked about the courts, when you said, I know you don't like Hillary, the argument was always, even if you don't like Hillary, think about the courts. I cannot tell you the number of people who said to me, don't worry about the Supreme Court. There's absolutely no way Donald Trump would be against abortion. He'll go down in history. He's accomplished two things: racking up $8 trillion of debt, giving a tax cut to the richest 1%, and appointing the 3 justices who overturned Roe. That's his legacy. But in 2016, people projected, not everybody, but a lot of low information voters, a lot of people who thought they were smarter than they actually are, projected their wishes onto Donald Trump. That's what happens with third-party candidates. John Anderson, Perot. It's less who the candidate actually is, more of who you want the candidate to be, especially because they're not going to win. They're not going to win. So the Kennedy effect, the Bobby Kennedy effect, will be different in different states. First of all, he's not going to be on every ballot. But the effect that he has as a spoiler will be different depending on which ballots he's on. It's conceivable, if you look at the polling, and I know I say don't look at the polling, but you have to. It's conceivable that Bobby Kennedy will take votes from Trump in Texas, but this Quinnipiac poll from Wisconsin shows that he's taking votes from Biden in Wisconsin. So, again, Bobby Kennedy is never going to win. He's a protest vote. A protest vote doesn't need to get nailed down on where he stands on Ukraine, abortion, or the economy. That's the great thing about being a third-party candidate. You can be sly. Bobby Kennedy, the worm didn't eat the part of his brain that creates a cunning political savvy. He knows what he's doing. He's all over the map. Right? Best headline ever. Look, I like Bobby Kennedy. I do. I can't help it. I like Bobby Kennedy. I'm getting angry at him. If he wins the election for Biden, I'll be okay with him. Best headline ever. From the New York Times. RFK Jr. says doctors found a dead worm in his brain. Apparently, the worm died by suicide after listening to RFK Jr.'s thoughts. The worm was found back in 2010. Isn't there? I think there's a vaccine that you can take to prevent worms from growing in. Oh, yeah. Too bad. The worm was found back in 2010 when Kennedy complained his thinking was starting to get foggy. 2 years later, he gave a deposition where he said, quote, "I have cognitive problems. Clearly, I have short-term memory loss, and I have longer-term memory loss that affects me. So, run for president. How can you not?" Kennedy now insists those symptoms have all disappeared. Okay, if you say so. Well, some good news for Bobby Kennedy, and I do wish him well. He was one of my heroes. Okay, his writing on the environment, the politics of the environment, he is a great man, and that will live way beyond the damage he's caused to the medical community with this anti-vax nonsense. I hope. I wish him well. I do. And he's got some good news. Good news for Bobby Kennedy Jr. Actor Kevin Spacey has officially endorsed Bobby Kennedy for president. It's nice to see Spacey throwing his considerable weight behind a presidential candidate instead of on top of a young, aspiring actor. This is what Kevin should have been doing from the get-go. Good for you, Kevin Spacey. Spacey said, he went on Twitter and said, quote, "There's a lot." This was his official endorsement of RFK Jr. This is Kevin Spacey. They say he's washed up, but I heard there was a big television show that he starred in London. There was a big British TV show last week, all about him. So he's back. So Kevin Spacey, riding the wave of this hit television show that he starred in Great Britain. Was it Channel 4 in Great Britain? They did a whole documentary about Kevin Spacey. His time at the Old Vic, how he nurtured young actors. Coming off this hit television documentary about his life, Kevin Spacey said, quote, "There's a lot I can learn from this man." Okay. He's talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He goes on to say, "When the world turned its back on me, Bobby leaned in. He's a formidable fighter for justice and a loyal friend that's not afraid to stand up for what he believes." Okay. And just as soon as Bobby Kennedy figures out what he believes, I'm sure he'll tell us. So I have a question for Kevin Spacey, just out of curiosity. Bobby Kennedy's brain got eaten by a worm. What's your excuse? Just kind of curious. Well, Bobby Kennedy Jr., who I really... It pains me to talk this way about Bobby Kennedy Jr. But I think they do have vaccines to prevent parasites from eating your brain. Or if it's not a vaccine, I would assume the evil drug companies have a pill for that. But Bobby did get rid of that brain-eating parasite, but he's picked up a new one, Russell Brand. The brain-eating parasite, Russell Brand, has announced that he is officially endorsing Bobby Kennedy for president. I mean, what a week for Bobby. First, Kevin Spacey, and then Russell Brand, all in the same week. It's an embarrassment of riches. Not for Bobby Kennedy, for the lawyers fighting that plethora of rape allegations leveled against the two of them, Russell Brand and Kevin Spacey. Hey, look, in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. Unfortunately for Kevin Spacey and Russell Brand, they've been accused of rape in London, where you're not innocent until proven guilty. But anyway, good for RFK Jr. He's got 2 movie stars in his corner. Russell, people listen to Russell Brand. He doesn't listen to them, especially when they say stop, but people listen to Russell Brand and they listen to Kevin Spacey. They got a lot of fans, and this is why Russell and Kevin Spacey are hosting a big comedy fundraiser this Friday for Bobby Kennedy. It's a fundraiser along with their friends, Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby. It's a big night of comedy. They're calling an evening of non-consensual laughter. Also on the bill, for some reason, Donald Trump. I don't understand that. Why would Donald Trump be on the same bill as Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, Russell Brand, and Kevin Spacey? Maybe E. Jean Carroll can explain. Okay, there is a real evening of comedy to raise money for Bobby Kennedy Jr. And you should know about this because it's on May 15th in Nashville, Tennessee. This is real. It's a night of country and comedy with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Nicole Shanahan, his running mate, and friends. It's an evening of comedy with Robert F. Kennedy and friends. And by friends, they mean washed up hacks desperate for stage time. All right, these are actual comics. And I shouldn't have said washed up because a lot of these comics never made it enough in show business to qualify as washed up. Who's on the bill? Jim Brewer? Remember Jim Brewer, Goat Boy? Let's hope South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem isn't in the audience. We know what she does to goats. Also on the bill, Russell Brand, who is the GOAT, greatest of all turds. And Mike Binder. I found this surprising. Mike Binder is coming out for Bobby Kennedy Jr. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Mike Binder, he is what they call in Hollywood a triple threat. He's a comedian, a director, and he's unvaccinated. That makes him a triple threat, so you may want to keep your distance from him. Also on the bill, Jeff Dye and Rob Schneider. Rob Schneider. They're all, and some other people who I was at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee. I think I'm going to go. I'm going to go. This sounds like fun. Now, is it okay if I wear a mask? Not because I'm afraid of catching COVID. I want to wear a mask because this lineup really stinks to high heaven. And no, I'm just, Rob Schneider is really funny. And so is Mike Binder. So is Jim Brewer, especially when they talk about their politics. They're really funny. It's kind of surprising where people go with their politics. I mean, Schneider is a genius, literally a chess genius. And Mike Binder, Jim Brewer, Russell Brand, I could live without. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is a genius. This article, I love Rob Schneider. Makes me laugh really hard. Not just his politics. He is really funny. Really, really funny. This is an article from the New York Sun. It says, quote, Rob Schneider, who will be appearing at RFK Jr.'s Night of Comedy, performed at a Republican fundraiser last year. And halfway through his set, the host of this Republican fundraiser grabbed Rob Schneider's microphone, yelled at him, told him to sit down, and then the host of the fundraiser apologized to the audience for Rob Schneider's material, which the Republican fundraising host said was too raunchy. Really, too raunchy for a crowd of Republicans. Now, the head of their party had unprotected sex with a porn star right after his wife gave him a son. He was found guilty of raping E. Jean Carroll last year. And he likes to warm up his crowd by making fun of people in wheelchairs. But Rob Schneider, the comedian, is too raunchy for Republicans. How raunchy do you have to get for Republicans to call you raunchy? What did Rob Schneider do? Fist the ghost of Betty White? How do you offend Republicans? I mean, other than provide food stamps to single moms, other than giving single moms food stamps so they can feed their babies, how do you offend a Republican? Well, speaking of Kennedys, sworn in on Monday, Democrat Tim Kennedy, no relation to the real Kennedys, Democrat Tim Kennedy is now the newest member of Congress. Tim Kennedy is the newest member of the House of Representatives, which means he has to go into the congressional cafeteria every afternoon and empty Marjorie Taylor Greene's piss jars. That's how it works. The new guy, if you're the new guy, you're the one. Every afternoon, you go into the cafeteria and empty Marjorie Taylor Greene's piss jars. So what does this mean? Well, for the time being, with Tim Kennedy, Democrat, sworn in, the Republicans are down to a one-vote majority. One vote. Marjorie Taylor Greene filed a motion for Mike Johnson to vacate the chair. It had been languishing in committee for weeks. And yesterday, she made good on her promise, and she forced a vote to punish Mike Johnson for pushing through passage of a $95 billion foreign aid package that included $60 billion for her arch nemesis, Ukraine. She's on the side of Russia. She has openly said that she's rooting for Putin. Well, during a 10-minute speech yesterday introducing the motion to vacate the chair, Marjorie explained why she was calling for Johnson to vacate, and she was greeted with boos and jeers from members of her own caucus. And then the motion was resoundingly rejected by a vote of 359 to 43. 7 voted present. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries made good on his promise to prop Republican Mike Johnson up. Why? Because the Speaker took a political risk pushing through that Ukraine supplemental. Took him 6 months, but he did it. And so, because Hakeem Jeffries promised him, you passed the Ukraine supplemental, I got your back. Every Democrat, except 39, voted against the motion for Mike Johnson to vacate. This now marks the second time in less than a year that the House was forced to vote on whether the Speaker should vacate. After keeping his job, Speaker Mike Johnson said he hopes this puts an end to the Republican Party making each other's lives miserable. He said we should be making life miserable instead for the poor, homosexuals, transgender youth, and 16-year-old girls carrying their stepdad's baby. That makes sense. Why are we beating up on each other, Republicans? There are so many homosexuals and transgender youth and 16-year-old girls who are pregnant who we can beat up on instead. Green introduced the motion to vacate in direct defiance of Donald Trump, who had been working behind the scenes urging her not to do it. This was the second setback this week for Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is really interesting. This is just like, I read this and I went, what? What? Earlier in the week, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like I had to read this story 3 times. And I'm on, antibiotics. I'm thinking, am I hallucinating? Earlier in the week, the House passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act by a vote of 320 to 91. 91 Republicans and some Democrats voted against the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. The bill would use the power of the federal government to deny funding to any schools that fail to crack down on anti-Semitic speech. I'm not making this up. Marjorie Taylor Greene said she was voting against the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act out of fear it would forbid students from getting to say that the Jews killed Jesus Christ. Marjorie Taylor Greene added, I believe the Jews killed Christ. And she said she feared that this bill would lead to people like her getting locked up for thinking that. Marjorie Taylor Greene said the bill, quote, could convict Christians of anti-Semitism for believing the gospel that says Jesus was handed over to Herod to be crucified by the Jews. The Jews. Why should we expect Marjorie to know the difference between the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes? Just call them the Jews. The Jews, like Jesus and his disciples. They were the Jews. The Jews killed Christ, according to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Just lump all the Jews who ever lived into one bucket and claim the Jews killed Jesus. And what does she base this on? 3 sentences found in the fictitious writings of 3 other Jews. That's where she gets the idea. She's read the writings of 3 other Jews from the New Testament. She takes 3 sentences and concludes that Jesus was killed by the Jews. That is one of the definitions of anti-Semitism, saying that the Jews killed Christ. Are the Jews responsible for Gaza? I mean, why not, right? The Jews. This is not just dangerous for the Jews, but it's dangerous for the Palestinians. It's dangerous for the gays, the everybody's. This level of stupidity is why we went into Iraq, and millions ended up dead because of people who say things like, the Jews killed Christ. We went into Iraq for many reasons, but mostly because George Bush is a war criminal, and he's stupid. And he was too stupid, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, to bother to learn that there is a difference between Sunnis and Shiites. I'm not making this up. This war criminal, George W. Bush, did not know that Iraq had Sunnis and Shiites who didn't get along living in Iraq, and that if you got rid of Saddam Hussein, sectarian violence would erupt. He was stupid, and he thought they were Arabs. And we're just going in to take care of the Arabs who live in Iraq. But they're not just Arabs. In fact, the Iranians who practice Islam are mostly Shiite, and they're not Arab, they're Persian. But let's go into Iraq because they're just Arabs. They're all the same. And we were guaranteed that they would welcome us as liberators. By the way, I have some really smart listeners. And last week, I accidentally referred to Iran as an Arab nation. I apologize. And boy, did my listeners let me have it. Although one listener included some links about Arabs who do live. There's some Arabs who live in Iran, but it is not an Arab nation. It's Persian. I apologize. So I knew that, but I said it, which there's something, so that makes it worse. Anyway. There's no such thing as the Arabs or the gays or the Jews or the blacks, Marjorie. Yeah. The Israeli-Hamas war now enters its 216th day. Really. So far, it is believed Hamas is holding 132 hostages in Gaza. 124 have been released. 1.2 million Palestinians right now are huddled in Rafah, a border crossing along southern Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is convinced this is where the last remaining battalion of Hamas soldiers are hiding. President Biden is urging Israel not to go in. He's warning Israel, do not go in. Israel so far has not entered, but rather engaged in what they call a limited incursion. On Wednesday, the Pentagon confirmed that President Biden halted the shipment of 3,500 bombs to Israel, insisting he will not allow any American bombs to be used in Rafah. President Biden said this week he's aware that American bombs excuse me, Biden said he is aware that American bombs have been used on Palestinian civilians. 34,000 Palestinians are believed to have been killed in Gaza since war broke out. America is the largest supplier of weapons to Israel. The New York Times reports that earlier in the week, Netanyahu's war cabinet voted to go ahead with the attack on Rafah. Biden said he is not walking away from Israel's security, but he will walk away from Israel's ability to wage war in Rafah. Since tanks began to move into Rafah, no emergency aid was able to flow into Gaza starting on Sunday. The flow of aid, excuse me, the flow of aid resumed on Wednesday. Benjamin Netanyahu met with CIA Director William Burns on Wednesday, while Israeli diplomats met face-to-face with representatives from Hamas in Egypt. On Monday, Hamas announced that it had agreed to Israel's demands for a ceasefire. But Benjamin Netanyahu said what Hamas agreed to was very far from Israel's core demands. After Hamas said it agreed to the ceasefire, Netanyahu's war cabinet then voted to go into Rafah. So what is the disagreement about the ceasefire? Israel wants a 6-week ceasefire, or as they call it, a sustainable calm. That's the language Benjamin Netanyahu is using. A sustainable calm as hostages are released and he releases Palestinian prisoners. Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire with Israeli troops pulling out of Gaza entirely. Israel said it will not agree to end this war until all the hostages have been released. Netanyahu has in the past said he will stop at nothing short of total victory. What is total victory? Eliminating the people he's negotiating with, Hamas. Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is the only Palestinian American serving in Washington. On Tuesday, she issued a statement asking the ICC, the International Criminal Court, to issue an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, there is the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice puts countries on trial. It is not connected to the International Criminal Court, which puts individuals on trial. In March of 2023, you might remember that the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin after it confirmed reports that Russian soldiers were kidnapping Ukrainian children and bringing them back to Russia. 124 countries are signatories to the International Criminal Court. Israel and America are not among them. That means Israel and America are not obligated to hand Benjamin Netanyahu over if the arrest warrant is issued by the International Criminal Court. But it would severely limit Netanyahu's ability to travel to any of the countries that are signatories. The Economist reports this morning that Benjamin Netanyahu is genuinely spooked by the thought of the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant. And according to The Economist, the threat of the arrest warrant is why some aid has begun to trickle back in through the Rafah crossing as of yesterday. What are we doing here? Okay. I'm going to keep going because nothing's better for a cold than talking 3 hours straight. But if I don't do this, I'll get sicker. President Biden spoke this week about the rising tide of anti-Semitism around the world. So this is complicated, anti-Semitism. Like I said earlier, one of the definitions of anti-Semitism is holding all Jews accountable for, say, the killing of Christ, or holding all Jews accountable for how war is being waged in Gaza. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu and the far-right ethno-nationalists who make up his coalition government, they have worked tirelessly before October 7th to make Benjamin Netanyahu's worldview synonymous with how all Jews view the world. Why is that? Well, Israel has AIPAC. Well, actually, not Israel. The Likud party, the far-right Likud party in Israel has AIPAC. They lobby for the far-right Likud party here in the United States. And because the Likud party has a lot of power, AIPAC, their representatives here in America, have been able to convince a lot of people that an attack against Benjamin Netanyahu is an attack against Israel and therefore an attack against all Jews. This is exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu wants. Any criticism of how he governs is automatically labeled anti-Semitic. But that means more than half the Jews living in Israel and roughly 80% of the Jews living in America are anti-Semitic because they don't like Benjamin Netanyahu. It's a little complicated. So to make things clearer for all of us, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the time to issue the following statement so Jews and non-Jews wouldn't be confused about criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government. Here is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yesterday I was criticized for having the nerve to call out blatant anti-Semitism on college campuses. None other than Bernie Sanders, the ultimate self-hating Jew, accused me of insulting your intelligence. Perhaps Bernie Sanders should spend a little less time self-hating and more time self-grooming. But I'm not here to talk about a man who cares even less about his heritage than he does about his haircut. I'm here to once and for all answer those who try to defend these anti-Semitic protesters, and to put an end to the argument that criticizing the actions of my government is somehow different than anti-Semitism, because there is too much at stake. So today, I am announcing that I am officially changing my name from Benjamin Netanyahu to Benjamin Semite. From here on, let there be no doubt that when you criticize me, Bibi Semite, and by extension my country, you are unequivocally an anti-Semite. And as I said, there is no place for anti-Semitism on college campuses, in Congress, or in your bedroom. And this anti-Semitism needs to be met with the full force of state, local, and federal officials. So the next time you call me reckless, genocidal, or corrupt, or for that matter, the next time you call my wife Sarah Semite, or my sons Yair and Avner Semite, anything of that nature, know that your anti-Semitism is on full display to the world and will not be tolerated. or my name isn't Bibi Semite.
That was Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Semite clearing that up for all of us. Thank you for that. I'm pretty sure that was Bibi Semite, the Prime Minister of Israel. I'm 100% positive that was Bibi Semite. David Plouffe was Barack Obama's campaign manager in 2008. Obama referred to David Plouffe as the unsung hero behind Obama's victory. Plouffe worked in the Obama White House until 2013, and then it was time to cash in. He became a lobbyist for Uber and then ended up becoming a lobbyist for Facebook. And he collected some fines along the way for not registering as a lobbyist in Chicago when he was lobbying then Mayor Rahm Emanuel about Uber. Anyway, David Plouffe is now hosting a podcast. Premieres this week. He's hosting a podcast with congenital liar Kellyanne Conway, and they're calling it The Campaign Manager. Isn't that great? Because, you know, she was Trump's campaign manager and he was Obama's. They have a lot in common. And that is why our democracy is on the brink. Because David Plouffe, Obama's campaign manager, has a lot in common with Kellyanne Conway. Now, you can trace the rise of Trump to Obama surrounding himself with people like David Plouffe. There are a lot of reasons for Donald Trump, but one of the reasons Trump rose to power is because Barack Obama failed to prosecute the criminals who crashed the economy in 2008. By the time Donald Trump came down the escalator in 2015, it became apparent to millions of Americans that the Democratic Party was in bed with Wall Street, maybe even more in bed than the Republicans were. Obama always told us who he was. He always said he was a corporatist. And he always surrounded himself with people like Rahm Emanuel and David Plouffe, people who always saw government service as a means to an end. Go into the government, learn how government regulation works from the inside out, then quit government service and cash big checks, helping corporations like Uber or Facebook, help them work around all those government regulations. It's dirty, disgusting, repulsive. It's beneath anybody who wants to call themselves a Democrat. David Plouffe doing a podcast with Kellyanne Conway. Right there. If you want to know why we're in trouble, it's that David Plouffe has no idea how wrong this is. I don't want a civil war. I don't want us tearing at each other's throats. But I also don't want to talk to Kellyanne Conway. Obama's campaign manager should not be going into business with Kellyanne Conway. I find it insulting to my intelligence and my patriotism when someone like David Plouffe is saying things, we need to listen to the other side. You're not listening to the other side. There is no other side. You are normalizing the morally bankrupt. Nazis. You are normalizing Nazis. And this is not just a betrayal of the Democratic Party, it is a betrayal of America. And it reminds us that this country is on the brink because too many of the people who used to run it think it's all just a game. We're in the game of politics. I can talk to Kellyanne Conway. David Plouffe is and always has been out of touch, but the days of the out of touch multimillionaire Democrats over. Get out of the party. Donald Trump is playing an age-old populist trick where he suckers the middle class and the poor into thinking he's waging class warfare against the elites, when in fact he's really waging class warfare on the people he's conned into voting for him, the poor and the middle class. This is straight out of the fascist playbook. It's how the Nazis, how Mussolini came to power. And they come to power partly when the other side, the people who are supposed to be representing the working class, when the other side ends up being people like David Plouffe, who went from Obama to Uber to Facebook to Kellyanne Conway. This is precisely how democracies die. Thanks a lot, David Plouffe, you scumbag. I guess the money from Uber and Facebook wasn't good enough for you. Scumbag. This is how democracies die, or democracies sometimes just get shot by South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. Well, she's had a bad week. As you all know by now, she's been promoting a book in which she brags about killing the family dog and the family goat. And for some reason, people aren't taking too kindly to all of that. So she doubled down and said Joe Biden should have shot his German Shepherd Commander because of all the Secret Service agents Commander bit. Commander bit 24 Secret Service agents. And it was bloody. So what do you do with a dog like Commander? This is a serious... We all love dogs, even Commander, especially Commander. What do you do when you have a dog like Commander? Well, you keep him away from children, and you move him off the White House grounds. You send him back to Delaware, and you make Commander feel he's not in danger, and he doesn't have to protect anyone. And that's what the Bidens have done. You don't kill Commander. That's what the Bidens did. Now, look, in a previous life, I had dogs and cats, and I had a dog that, this is true, I had a dog that bit one of my sons in the face. There were decisions that had to be made at the time. Unlike Kristi Noem, my decision was personal. Kind of like, abortion. It's nobody's business what we decided to do about a dog who bit my young son in the face. So I'm not going to tell you what I decided to do. It was painful. I will tell you that we got rid of my son. It was a tough decision, but I had to choose between this beautiful Rhodesian Ridgeback and my flatulent 2-year-old son. And I went with a Rhodesian Ridgeback. Unbelievable dog. But whatever I decided and why I made that decision was personal, and I'm not going to write about this decision in a book and then brag to you about something that required my making a very painful decision. This is the Republican Party. And when she wrote that, bragging about killing the goat, killing the dog, it's a death cult. The Republican Party, she knows that her party is a death cult. They celebrate death unless it's something that is not alive, like a fetus. The only life the Republicans care about is something that's not alive, a fetus. So Kristi Noem is having a hard time. And it's not fair. I mean, the poor woman is just trying to sell a book. She's just trying to get herself to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. That's all she wants. She just wants to be Donald Trump's running mate. And there she is right now in the gravel pit, bleeding out. It's really sad to watch. If you've seen her on Fox or Newsmax, I mean, even conservative networks are piling on. The gloves are off, and so she's canceled her book tour. She's not selling any books. Very sad. It's tough. She not only is being vilified for killing a puppy and a goat, she's also being accused of lying about meeting North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. She insists in her book that she met Kim Jong-un and stared this little tyrant down. And people accused her of lying, but that's not true, because I happen to know before Kristi Noem allegedly dated campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. Remember Corey Lewandowski? He was Trump's first campaign manager, but then he had to step aside because he got physical with a female reporter from Breitbart. And then there have been other accusations against Corey Lewandowski, sexually harassing, sexually assaulting women. It's been alleged that Kristi Noem, even though she was married to somebody else and Corey Lewandowski was married to somebody else, that she was dating Corey Lewandowski. But before Corey Lewandowski, I don't know about Corey Lewandowski, but I know for a fact that the governor used to date the supreme leader of North Korea. Here she is. I have pictures of Kristi Noem with Kim Jong-un on a date last year that he took her to the Westminster Dog Show. And here she is with the supreme leader right after running into Scooby-Doo while they were all Airbnb-ing it at Wickles Manor. Scooby doesn't look too happy. Zoinks. Rolling Stone magazine reports this morning that Donald Trump is quietly making plans to send kill teams into Mexico to wipe out drug cartels once he's back in the Oval Office. Trump should probably check with Don Jr. on this. I have a feeling Jr.'s not going to like that. Donald Trump has always bragged about his prized building, 40 Wall Street, which he doesn't own. He owns the right to lease the property upon which 40 Wall Street has been built. And he subdivided the lease and sold off parts of it and then borrowed against other parts of this lease. So nobody really knows how much of the lease he owns. and how much he borrowed against it. But we're going to find out. The Wall Street Journal reports that the lease on the property, 40 Wall Street, the crown jewel of Trump's real estate portfolio, supposedly, the Wall Street Journal says the lease on the property is what Trump claims is his single biggest asset, but it's worth a lot less. The commercial real estate business is cratering in New York City while we have massive homeless people. Massive homeless in New York. 21% of 40 Wall Street is empty, but people are living on the street. In 2015, 5% of 40 Wall Street was unoccupied. Now 21% unoccupied. 23,000 square feet of retail space are as empty as Donald Trump's diapers are full. That's what 40 Wall Street looks like. Trump, according to the Wall Street Journal, took out a $120 million mortgage on the lease, not the building, the lease. And that entire mortgage comes due in July. And here's the thing about commercial real estate. When you borrow $120 million, you're not expected to dent the principal. All you have to do is service the interest on the debt. And then when the mortgage comes due, you pay it off in its entirety. That's the way it's supposed to work. So Trump borrowed $120 million. All he's done is service the interest. He never dented the $120 million principal. Come July, he's got to come up with $120 million. He's got to pay $120 million to a banker he didn't rape, defame, or defraud. He's just got $120 million. And the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump is having a hard time finding a new lender willing to refinance that $120 million loan. I didn't know this, but apparently Trump is considered a bad risk. Trump media stock closed at $49.26 a share on Wednesday. It is up more than 3% for the day, and it's up 31% over the past 30 days. Maybe because Trump media just hired a new official auditor. They had to get a new auditor, all because the previous auditor, we've talked about this. This was the auditor that certified Trump media's financials and shepherded Trump media when it went from a private company to a publicly held company. That auditor who vouched for the sanctity of the books for Trump media, well, they just got shut down by the Securities and Exchange Commission, which accused the auditor of committing massive fraud. That's what the SEC said, massive fraud. And the auditor that Trump hired is now permanently banned from working with any companies that are publicly traded. He only surrounds himself with the best. Judge Juan Merchan, who is presiding over Trump's criminal trial, as you know, he finally caved and agreed last week to allow Donald Trump to miss a day of court so Donald could attend his son's high school graduation in Florida. Trump very passionately argued for one day to go down to Miami, down to Florida. He said it would not allowing me to see my son graduate would create undue hardship for a loving father like myself, not to be able to see what's his name graduate from kindergarten, college, high school. That's what Donald Trump told the judge. And the judge said, you know what, Mr. Trump, I'm a father too. I think you know that because I have a daughter you mercilessly attack on social media. So father to father, I'm going to let you go see your son graduate. And Trump is so excited about getting to see his kid get the degree. He's so excited that he's booked a big fundraiser on the very same day his son is graduating. I mean, there is no better. This is true. He booked a fundraiser on the day of his son's graduation because there's no better way of letting your kid know you love him than by showing up at his graduation saying, let me see that degree. What do you think I could get for it on eBay? Okay, gotta go. Some guy who owns a strip mall in Paramus, New Jersey is hosting a fundraiser for me. Hey, are you taking a gap year? You're not. You going straight to college? Great. So I'll see you in exactly 4 years. More good news for Donald Trump. You know that big RICO trial down in Georgia? Remember the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis? Remember she carried on a romantic relationship with her lead prosecutor? Remember how Trump's lawyers filed a motion to have her removed because, why? Because Trump has millions of dollars from his super PAC to spend on lawyers who are just going to keep delaying this trial until Trump becomes president, then declares a national emergency and suspends our entire criminal justice system. I don't remember why Fani Willis, why Trump said she should be removed. I do know she was romantically involved with the lead prosecutor, and because the two of them took 3 vacations together, according to Donald Trump, that means she was ripping off taxpayers. This is from Donald Trump, who charged his own Secret Service $1,185 per night to stay at a Trump property so they could protect him while he was staying there as president of the United States. This happened like 40 weekends during his presidency. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars Trump cheated the Secret Service out of by charging them $1,185 per night for the privilege of protecting him at one of his properties. But Fani Willis, well, she needs round-the-clock protection from all those racially soaked death threats, and she decides to take 3 vacations with a coworker, and somehow that's ripping off taxpayers. Well, the judge in that case, in the RICO trial, held hearings, wasted everybody's time, and he ruled that Fani Willis showed poor judgment, but the trial can continue. And now the Georgia Court of Appeals has agreed to hear Donald Trump's appeal of the judge's decision not to throw Fani Willis to the curb. And that means the RICO trial down in Georgia has been delayed until who knows when. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments last month on whether or not an ex-president has blanket immunity for any crimes he may have committed while he was in office. We all know He doesn't. It's an open and shut case. And yet, it's been, 2 weeks? They can't make up their mind on whether or not a president has blanket immunity. Down in Miami, the judge presiding over Donald Trump's criminal trial for violating the Espionage Act, that judge has postponed that trial indefinitely. Indefinitely. And you know who's laughing at me right now? All my black listeners. They're laughing hysterically at me right now. David Feldman thought Trump was going to jail. Feldman thought the courts were going to save us from Donald Trump. Every black person in America is laughing at self-righteous white liberals like David Feldman, who for the past 3 years kept insisting, well, certainly we're a nation of laws and Donald Trump will not be able to get away with any of this. They are just every time I said January 6th, well, we'll see about that. I want to speak to the manager right now. Yeah. I actually thought there was going to be a trial. You know who knew there was never going to be a trial? My black listeners. New York Mayor Eric Adams assured citizens that if Judge Juan Merchan follows through with his threat to jail Donald Trump, if Trump continues to violate these gag orders, Mayor Adams said Rikers Island is ready to accept Donald Trump. Sure, yeah. And you can tell Donald Trump is terrified of going to jail. Here's what he told reporters.
Stormy Horseface Daniels.
Okay, he didn't say that. I mean, he did say that. He says it all the time. All right, it's going to get a little graphic here. Porn star Stormy Daniels took the stand again on Thursday. In her testimony, Stormy Daniels was asked if she hated Donald Trump, and she said yes, under oath. I hate Donald Trump. We shouldn't hate. I mean, sure, she testified that in 2011, a strange man approached her in a Las Vegas parking lot and threatened to kill her and her daughter if she didn't keep her mouth shut. But that's no reason to hate somebody. Trump appeared visibly angered by Stormy Daniels' testimony, and he turned bright vermilion. He turned bright vermilion, which is the color of raging red mixed with spray-tanned orange. Vermilion. That's the color of Trump's face when he's angry. Vermilion. Vermilion is also how much Trump owes the government and all his creditors. $1 vermilion. Vermilion. It's more than a gazillion, but less than a bazillion. Trump dozed off briefly during Stormy's morning testimony, but in the afternoon, this is true, he reportedly went into a deep sleep, which was very disturbing to his lawyers because Trump's snores are much louder and smellier than his farts. Stormy said that when she went up to his hotel room in Lake Tahoe, she said when she went up to his hotel room, she said Trump opened the hotel room door and greeted her wearing pajamas. Stormy testified that when she saw Trump in his pajamas, he reminded her of Hugh Hefner. Yeah, he reminds, just like Hugh Hefner. You know, if Hugh Hefner never read a single book in his life. Then she testified that when she went to freshen up in the bathroom, she said when she came out, Trump had already stripped down to his boxers. And as the entire courtroom tried to get the image of Donald Trump standing in a hotel room wearing nothing but boxer shorts out of their minds, Judge Juan Merchan's gavel literally went limp. Stormy testified that while she was in Trump's bathroom, she went through his toiletry bag. This is true. And she said he wears Old Spice cologne. Upon hearing Donald Trump wears Old Spice, millions of men around the world switched to Man Aqua by Jimmy Choo. So, if you want to know what Donald Trump smells like, because everybody says he stinks, but nobody can describe what he smells of, I'm going to do it for you, okay? We now have enough information. This is how you can figure out how Donald Trump smells. Feed your dog a Big Mac. Wait for him to throw up, and then spray it with Old Spice. That's what Donald Trump smells like. Stormy also testified that Donald's shampoo is Prell. Prell. I would have guessed Woolite, but apparently it's Prell. I guess CVS that day was all out of Alberto VO5. He wears Old Spice and uses Prell. It's like back in 1966, Trump said, okay, I think I'm going to stop right here. Everything just stops in 1966. No need to grow any further. Stormy testified that Donald told her that he and Melania didn't sleep in the same bed. Well, after this week, he won't be allowed to sleep in the same galaxy as Melania. I'm starting to think the only reason Melania hasn't divorced this orange, spray-tanned miasma of methane is because she'd be the one paying the spousal support. Stormy testified that before getting intimate with Donald, this is my stomach, I'm getting an upset stomach. Stormy said that before getting intimate with Donald Trump, he complimented her by saying she reminded him of his daughter Ivanka. Whew. Wow. Think about this. His wife just gave him a son, and he's about to have unprotected sex with a porn star while his wife is back in New York breastfeeding the baby. And in his fevered mind, he thinks it's okay to tell the woman he's about to have sex with, you remind me of my daughter. Because in his mind, that's not cheating. I was thinking of my daughter the entire time. How can that be adultery, honey? I was thinking of my daughter, Ivanka. So that's not cheating. Stormy said, before they got down to business, Donald dangled an appearance on The Apprentice in front of her. I guess when you have nothing else to dangle in front of a woman, you go with the old, sex with me will be great for your career. Oh, you Casanova, you. Stormy testified that she and Donald, I'm not making this up, Stormy testified under oath that she and Donald did it missionary style. And by missionary, Donald converted her to become a lesbian. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. I got through this show. Thank you for listening. I took a week off. I've been sick, as you can tell. I want to do this show. I want to do shorter shows more frequently. I need to figure out how to do that. Hey, if you want a more glimpse into my mental illness, go to shopdavidfeldman.com. Shopdavidfeldman.com. I have a little store of coffee mugs and T-shirts, and shopdavidfeldman.com. It's not for the faint of heart. It's some of the stuff is really bad, but check it out. Thank you to my listeners. Thank you for your kind words. I'm getting better. I'm on antibiotics. If you liked any of this nonsense, please hit the like button so I remain in your feed. Please share it with people who might benefit from this. I don't know if Bob is in the chat room today, but thank you to all the people in the chat room. Oh, and let me thank, I don't do a good job on the super chats. So, Thomas Riegler, thank you, Thomas. Linda Kotzman, video game controller poses triumphantly in between the words critical hit. Oh, I guess these are describing emojis. Thank you, Linda Kotzman. Thank you from Philip Blair. According to Philip Blair, RFK Jr. once said Gazans are the most pampered people on earth. Okay? And then he later wrote, the 19th of November, 1919, Zion National Park in Utah, USA. Well, I'm not sure what that means, but thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the chats. Please leave a comment. I read all your comments. I am going to do another show maybe Friday night. Thank you. It's good to be back.